Hello, grade 12. How's everybody doing today? I just want to thank everybody who signed in for our Zoom class yesterday. I really appreciate it. Good times. Again, I wish and hope everyone is doing well in these strange times. So today I want to try a little something different here. Try and give the lesson on this application called Debut. So my goal is to finish up section 1 of chapter 5. As some of you might have noticed that in the lesson we stopped at theme 4 and did not get to theme 5, and that's what I want to talk about today, explaining the changes in supply. And we'll see the difference between the change in supply compared to the change in quantity supplied. And again, continue to think about the logic of demand that we talked about before. So, I will also post a complimentary or a supplemental video that will explain the graph better because they do a much better job of it, and they use good visuals rather than just putting a graph up here trying to explain it. So I'll have a video up there that will supplement this or complement this so you can see the difference between change in quantity supplied and the change in supply visually through the graph, and you see the shifts in the curves here. Okay, without further ado, we'll start discussing theme 5, and theme 5 has to do with change in supply. So if you remember to yesterday, we talked about the change in quantity supplied. And that had to do with changes in price. Okay? So when the price changes, the quantity supplied changes. And there's no shifts in the curve. It remains the same. So today, we're going to talk about the change in supply. So we look at situations outside of the price that might alter the amount of supply of a product at all possible prices. So in other words, non-price determinants that would change supply. So things happen outside of price that changes how much of a product will be produced, that has an impact on producers that would make them produce more or less of a good. And when we're talking about change in supply, we're now talking about shifts of the actual supply curve, the creation of a new supply curve. But before we look at this, I want the video to do that for you. We're actually going to go through the reasons, the actual non-price determinants that might shift the curve to the right or left in the first place. So non-price determinants that will cause producers to either produce more or less of a good, okay? And the first reason, the first non-price determinant, I guess we could say, is the cost of resources. So what we mean by the cost of resources is a change in the cost of productive inputs, such as land, labor, or capital. So a change in the cost of the factors of production can cause a change in supply. Why? Supply might increase because of a decrease in the cost of labor or something, like packaging. So if, workers become cheaper, or, you can start packaging things for cheaper, your production input, you can produce more, okay? So with the cost of labor, like you can get more workers or something like that, and that would increase your productivity, and that will shift the curve to the right, okay? So an increase in supply, as you'll see, will be a shift to the right. However, as many things and most things in economics, the opposite is always true. So an increase in the cost of inputs, and there's a typo there on the PowerPoint, sorry about that. An increase in the cost of inputs would have the opposite effect. So when land, labor, or capital becomes more expensive, producers might not be willing to make more of the product, so they wouldn't make as much as they would if it was cheaper, and this would shift the curve to the left. So, some people argue that, McDonald's workers in America should be making $20 an hour. That would be, an increase in the cost of input because labor would be going up. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Maybe for the workers it's a good thing, but customers at McDonald's it might not be, because it would force them to, sell the burgers at a higher price, or not make them as frequently because of the cost of the input. Another non-price determinant, productivity. And this has to do with the motivation of the workers. So when workers are motivated and trained, they are more productive. And when they're more productive, productivity of your business goes up. And when productivity of workers goes up, so does the supply, a shift to the right. So you have highly motivated workers, they're well trained, they're efficient. This makes the supply go up. And again, we're not talking about price here. And again, the opposite is also true. When workers are unmotivated and or untrained, productivity goes down. And when productivity goes down, so does your ability to supply your product. So, workers might not be happy with their pay. They might drag their feet. They might think you're an unfair boss. They don't care. They just kind of go through the motions. This can actually create a shift to the left of the supply curve, because supply is going to go down when your workers aren't, working hard and putting in the effort to make the product. So that's another example of a non-price determinant of a change in supply. That brings us to technology. So almost always the introduction of a new technology will shift the curve to the right, because generally new technologies lowers the cost of production. Like when you put a new technology into the production of a good, you're making things better for the production. So it's going to always increase productivity and efficiency. So with the injection of a new technology, you're going to see the increase in supply, because obviously if it's making you more productive and efficient, you can make more of it, which as an entrepreneur you will. Another non-price determinant, expectations. So the expectations about the price of a product in the future can also impact the supply. So if you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business, and you think the price of your product might go up in the future, then you might begin decreasing its supply in advance, in hopes that the price will go up and you'll be ready and you'll be able to put your product out onto the market, ready to go. And again, the opposite is also true. You think there's going to be, a tank in the market for, say, like, I don't know, cell phones or something is going to tank in the future. To anticipate that, you might start producing less to anticipate that market crash, so your losses won't be as much. So expectations can cause a change in supply. Again, these are non-price determinants. We're not talking about changes in prices. We're talking about things outside of price that can change the supply. Furthermore, taxes and subsidies can also determine changes in supply, because businesses view taxes as a cost of production. And again, the logic is straightforward here. So if the company is being taxed for a product or license, the cost of production goes up. This is going to make them produce less. So if you're, I don't know, maybe like you're an automobile company, you know, a German automobile company, and you're producing your product in the United States. Maybe the United States is going to tax you because, you know, you're a foreign, you know, company. So this would, you know, make your cost of production go up and make you produce less of the car within like the United States, let's say. Also, again, this is a repeating theme, the opposite is also true. So the less a company is taxed, the more productive they will be and the more they can supply. So, you know, companies will go to like cities or countries that give them tax breaks. You know, this is why you see maybe sometimes that, for example, in the United States, there'll be large, huge companies in like these small towns. You know, for example, maybe like, I don't know, like Nike will have a factory in a super small town out in the middle of nowhere in someplace in America. Why? Probably because this town or city has given them some type of a tax break. So, hey, you come and build your factory here and, you know, give us, you know, a place where people can get jobs. We'll barely tax you at all. And again, this would be, you know, a company would want to do this because the less they're taxed, the more they can produce and the more their cost of production goes down. Also, governments can subsidize certain products by making conditions favorable to lowering the cost of production. That's kind of what I just explained. So subsidizing certain, you know, markets, you know, encourages people to stay in the market and also encourages new people to enter the market. This is a bit more advanced. We'll come back to this later. Anyways, the point is, more taxes, the less productive. The less taxes, the more productive. And this kind of takes us into something that also has an impact, and that's government regulations. So think about it again, the logic is straightforward. So increased or tighter government regulations on products can restrict supply. So if the government regulates how you can make something or how much of a product you can make, you know, this restricts your supply. You know, think of command and free market economy here. Looser regulations can make production more easy and increase the supply. So the less the government is, you know, regulating and restricting the way things are produced, then the more the companies can supply. Kind of makes sense. And finally, the number of sellers. This has to do more with the market as a whole. So the logic of this is that the more sellers in the market, the more of a product there will be. That makes sense. So if you got, you know, a bunch of, you know, people that are, you know, you have a lot of people who are making shoes, the supply of shoes in the market is going to be high. There'll be a lot for people to choose from, and people won't have a problem finding a pair of shoes. And again, the opposite goes. When there's less sellers in the market, the less supply of a product there will be. So if you don't have that many people selling a certain amount of a product, then it'll be harder to maybe find the product. So that's kind of how the logic goes. And all right, I think that will do it, and I hope that made sense. If not, please, you can start a discussion on Google Classroom. And again, I will post a supplemental video to this lesson. And I hope everyone is doing well, and maybe we can Zoom or something soon. Let me know what you think about the PowerPoint or going through the PowerPoint like this, and tell me what you think. So I'll see you guys later.